World Heritage Study and a background in communication, awareness raising, and advocacy for cultural heritage. Claire, I will give you 15 minutes for your presentation. And at the end of the session, we'll give time for questions. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. Good morning, Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in Beirut, but I'm very happy I can join you virtually to talk a little bit about IFLA's work across different areas of cultural heritage, different approaches to cultural heritage, but hopefully all working towards the same goal. So if I can quickly share my screen, just one moment. Yes, so as was introduced, I'd like to show how IFLA is trying to tell a story. And we tell this story through multiple different approaches, through multiple different places, but hopefully telling one cohesive story that we can bring voices from all over the world together to help tell. Firstly, again, my name is Claire McGuire. I'm the Manager of Policy and Advocacy at IFLA. My contact is here on the screen. So if you have questions that you don't, that aren't answered today, or other ideas, or any other input, feel free to contact me. Very quickly, IFLA is the global voice of the library field. So we work around the world to bring libraries, library associations, institutions, and professionals together to exchange, to talk about their specific areas of the profession, to inspire professional practice, and to help build capacity to advocate for libraries, for their work that they're doing, for the impact of libraries on global goals. So all of our work across IFLA, so we focus on many different areas of the library sector or of library practice. All of our work is falling within one of these areas at the moment, aligned to our strategy. So that also goes for cultural heritage, where we are speaking on behalf of libraries at the international level. We're connecting professionals, building advocacy capacity, and then, as I said, inspiring professional practice. So I wanted to frame my presentation this morning around a story. And a story, I mean a story in the way that what we want people outside of the field to think when they think about libraries in cultural heritage, but also what we want people within the world to, or within the sector, within libraries, to feel that they are a part of, that they are contributing to. And I know there's many different angles of cultural heritage. There's many different aspects of what libraries do in preservation and conservation and access to heritage. So trying to tell one story is really difficult, but I'll give you how the overview of how we approach it. So at the moment, the story that I'm trying to tell through my work is that culture across all of its domains is a critical pillar of sustainable development. And libraries help enable the transversal impact of culture to benefit all people. So the idea here is I wanted to go beyond preservation and conservation for the sake of preservation and conservation. Obviously, to enable cultural heritage to benefit people, we must save it, we must preserve it, we must provide access to it. But by doing so, we are contributing to bettering society. We're contributing to sustainable development. And that contribution is transversal. So it impacts the many different areas of development. It can have an economic impact. It can have an impact on education, on employment, on access to information, on building a feeling of cultural appreciation for cultural diversity, a culture of peace, of acceptance, of exchange, and of equitable access to cultural information. So this is the story that we're trying to tell at IFLA in our cultural heritage work. And we tell that in many different places and in many different ways. So as an overview, because I don't have a lot of time to go into all the different areas of work we do, our four main areas of activity are our professional program, our work in policy and advocacy, our work on cultural property protection, and our work at the international level in partnership building, both within the cultural sector and beyond. And I'll go a little bit into each of these areas, but I wanted to highlight that these are not working separately. Each of our activities in these different domains, in these different areas, contributes to one another. And when I say our activities, I don't just mean my activities or the work of IFLA headquarters. This is a joint effort across our network of members, of volunteers, of experts. There's a lot of different input that goes into this. And I wanted to stress that that input is not isolated in one area. So the work that's being developed in our professional units, which I will go into a little bit, that is feeding into our ability to participate in cultural policy, that is helping us build capacity for cultural property protection. And that is fueling our ability to interact in our international partnerships, where we are trying to find spaces to elevate, to amplify library input, and to contribute across the sector to impacting on joint goals. So again, we're not looking at all of these domains in isolation. And the idea behind approaching this work in this story sort of structure, in my hope, in my plans for in my job, is to help facilitate that exchange. So I wanted to go a little bit into each of these areas, and apologies if you're already familiar with IFLA, if you've worked with this before, but as an overview, that first area, our professional program, is so central to IFLA's work. It's so we can't do the work that we do without our international members, without our professional units, the standing committees on our units, and the work that they're doing. So our professional sections and special interest groups are made up of experts from around the world, and they set their own agenda. In their work is really focused on developing the profession within their areas of expertise. And that development is fueled by international exchange, by information sharing, by best practice or good practice, and yeah, facilitating this platform where librarians working on the same topic in many different places in the world can share and talk about the work they're doing. So there's quite a robust presence of cultural heritage in our professional program. Preservation and conservation section is focused on exactly that, the practices of preserving and conserving library collections. Rare books and special collections does touch on that, but goes beyond, talks a lot about access, talks a lot about exhibitions and bringing access to the collections as well. National libraries are helping solidify a national collection. And then we touch on lots of different areas of documentary heritage and audiovisual and multimedia section, art libraries, and then more of a broad look at cultural heritage from Indigenous matters, from multicultural libraries. So I encourage you to look on IFLA's website and explore all of the work, all of the news and events happening by all of these sections. And a good way to get into IFLA's professional program in terms of cultural heritage is looking at the activities of our Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee. This committee is appointed by our governing board. They advise our governing board on cultural heritage matters that are relevant to the library section or sector, but they also coordinate across our professional program to ensure that all of these different areas are talking to one another, that we can bring all the threads together and take a step forward in terms of, okay, where do we go? What do we want to do? And I wanted to highlight one area of the action plan that is relevant to this conference and might be interesting to you. One of the goals of the current advisory committee is to establish a digital cultural heritage network at IFLA. So the interesting thing about that and about these plans is that the goal for this network is not just to stay in the cultural heritage side of IFLA, but to bring library professionals working in many different areas of the profession that might not be immediately working on cultural heritage, but have expertise in different areas of digital access, digital cataloging, and bring all of these different people together to work on solidifying a way forward on digital cultural heritage preservation and the presence of libraries in this discussion. So on the screen here, I have the link, but also a QR code that can take you right to the committee's action plan. And I encourage you to have a look at that and get an overview of the direction. So the next step I want to talk about is international cooperation. And from headquarters, from the policy and advocacy work we do, this is a really key aspect of the work. So again, we're telling that story. We're telling that story that libraries are essential to enable culture to benefit society. And where do we tell that story? We tell that story at UNESCO, at different UN agencies, at different intergovernmental organizations like UN Habitat. We participate in different expert groups that are bringing professionals from different areas of cultural heritage or even broader together. We work across the GLAM sector, so we have strong partnership with museums, with archives, with monuments and sites, and we have a very long-standing and very fruitful collaboration with those different memory institutions and heritage organizations. And then we work in different library networks as well. And why do we do this? In some cases, there's a lot of power in just bringing librarians and libraries to the table, especially when it comes to discussions around internet governance, around cultural property protection, around climate issues. Libraries have a role, and they're often not invited just on the top level. We need to be showing up and speaking up, and there's a lot of positive outcomes that can happen just by being there and bringing our perspective. We help libraries advocate for themselves. So this work isn't only being done by me or by our staff at IFLA. We are trying to find opportunities to bring our members and our experts into these areas. So, you know, if there's conferences, especially in different regions of the world, finding opportunities to bring librarians to the UN, to the COP climate conferences, to different areas where they might not already be able to go. We want to pave the way for librarians to be working there, finding new opportunities for professionals. And again, exchanging good practice, it's especially in cultural heritage and in protecting culture. There's so much that can be learned by speaking to museums, by speaking to monuments and sites sector. So we try to cooperate in both directions, both giving good practice, but also learning. And in that, I wanted to highlight IFLA's preservation and conservation PAC centers. This is a network of specialist centers hosted by different libraries around the world, and they focus on preservation and conservation with a special aspect of knowledge of the relevance of or a special aspect of relevant knowledge for the country and the region. So different areas are facing different challenges. So we have centers, especially based in more tropical regions, that are experts on pests, on mold, on preservation in very challenging environmental climates. We have different centers that are experts on digital heritage, on heritage of Indigenous people. And this network enables this direct exchange and the development of different resources. So I have a link and a QR code here for one-pagers or short documents that were developed by the PAC centers to help address some of these specific concerns. Currently, the PAC Center Network is developing a tool to help build capacity for safeguarding at different levels of ability, at different levels of capacity. So it's not always about best practice, it can be about good practice. So we're bringing in all these different pieces of expertise to develop this resource. Hopefully in the next year, we will be able to share that. Moving quickly on, I want to touch on the work that we do around protecting and promoting cultural heritage, safeguarding cultural heritage, and helping respond in emergency situations. I'm sure you know documentary heritage is vulnerable in both human-caused and natural disasters. Works on paper are vulnerable, but also we see libraries and their collections being targeted in different conflicts for different regions. So we do a lot to bring the expertise on documentary heritage into this, into these talks. A lot of cultural property protection, especially at the international level, is focused on world heritage, on museum objects, and we want to be the voice for documentary heritage and for libraries, because this is also critical and also must be protected. So the work that we do in this area, it's twofold or multifold, if you will. We work to, in emergencies, we work to connect with the Library Association, with major libraries in the affected region. So I'm sure you know in Beirut, so again, very local to where you are, in 2020, there was a horrible disaster, and we heard from the Lebanese Library Association all of the amazing work that you were doing, and we were trying to help facilitate these connections between the Library Association and different players in the field. We're doing similar work in Ukraine, and we're keen to, as much as we can, try to amplify and elevate the realities faced by libraries in affected areas. And we bring that to our partners at Blue Shield. IFLA is one of the founding 4 organizations of Blue Shield International, with museums, archives, monuments, and sites. Our partners at UNESCO were able to elevate, bring libraries into the international coordination. And I added Memory of the World because we work to, again, protect documentary heritage, promote the importance of documentary heritage preservation with partners from UNESCO Memory of the World as well. And I know the next speaker, Stefan, will speak more about trafficking, but I wanted to touch on the fact that we have a regional approaches to this as well. And a very good example is IFLA's PAC Center, hosted at Qatar National Library, who's been doing really incredible work on theft and trafficking of manuscripts, which, again, as I said, the PAC Centers focus specifically on regional issues, and the PAC Center has been able to take some significant steps forward in the MENA region and beyond, tackling or approaching documentary heritage theft. And some of the lessons learned there are very important to bring to the international level as well. So there's really a connection there between the regional approach and what we can do with international partners. And finally, I wanted to bring this all together to talk about the advocacy work we do. We, especially from headquarters, but also bringing opportunities for our wider network, we want to be present in the room where cultural policy is being made. We want to be connecting to policymakers at the international level, at the national level, and talking about all of this work that we're doing across all these areas and helping them see that libraries are stakeholders, that libraries are partners, and ultimately have advocacy wins in the end, where we have library perspectives and good conditions for libraries to sustainably do this work reflected in policy outcomes, in text and implementation. And so we do this work in a lot of different domains. Earlier this week here in The Hague, where I am, UNESCO celebrated the 70th anniversary of the 1954 Hague Convention. So this was a very immediate example from this week of bringing libraries to this space and highlighting the work that's being done across our network and from all of our experts, and trying to sort of bring it together and present it at the international level. And one really important aspect of this work is we are actively working to advocate for a culture goal, a culture sustainable development goal in the post-2030 Sustainable Development Framework. So you might be familiar with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. There's already a lot of work happening to define what sustainable development looks like when the current goals run out in 2030. So we are working across IFLA, but also with many other organizations and close partners in cultural heritage to advocate for a goal on culture. So our proposal is a goal that says ensure cultural sustainability for the well-being of all. And within that, we want targets that really will support the library sector to do their work and to more clearly tell the story of the impact libraries have. So I've included the link here where you can find our proposal for a culture goal. If you're interested in this work, in advocating in this work, please do get in touch with me. We have resources that can help you become an advocate and get involved. So at the end, I wanted to come back to the story. Culture is a critical pillar of sustainable development, and libraries help enable the transversal impact of culture to benefit all people. And I hope that by showing these different domains of work that we've done, it kind of becomes more clear how we are trying to pull these many different threads together to have a strong presence, a strong proposal, argument, whatever you will, for the role that cultural heritage in libraries and libraries as cultural heritage institutions have. So to end, I just wanted to put some different ways you can work with IFLA, connecting with our units, with our regional divisions, with our advisory committee is a good way to get involved in specific programs that are interesting to you. As I said, the Digital Heritage Network might be interesting. Sharing stories with us, our SDG stories on the library map of the world are a really good way to highlight your impact, highlight what you're doing around sustainable development, around connecting culture to people, getting involved as a member, and then getting involved, contacting us for support with advocacy. As I said, we're always happy to do that. So again, there's my contact. I hope this gave a better idea of the many different areas of work that we're doing. And I will end there. So shukran, thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for this comprehensive story about IFLA and cultural heritage. Please stay with us until Stefan is done for the question and answers time, okay? Now, well, from the rooms of the IFLA headquarters in the Hague to the courtroom with Stefan Ippert. Stefan, are you with me? Are you with us?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Stefan
Yes.
is the former director of the Heritage Library at Qatar National Library. from 2016 until 2023. He is currently the head of heritage and documentary projects at Caravan Earth Foundation. Additionally, he serves as an instructor at the American University of Afghanistan. Stefan Eppert has been an adjunct professor since 2022 at the mentioned university, teaching courses on various topics, notably including fundamentals of combating the illicit circulation and trafficking of antiquities. Stefan will talk to us about the prosecution against cultural heritage trafficking, as well as the protection and preservations of documents. Stefan, he's an IFLA activist, but he will speak now about his experience in dealing with the three terminologies that I have mentioned, the protection, preservation, and the prosecution. Go ahead, Stefan. I'll give you 15 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Imad. And I'm happy to be with you here today, even if it's online, and happy to speak after my friend and colleague Claire from IFLA, because I have been working with her for many years when we created the IFLA PAC Center in Qatar National Library. But today I would like to give a kind of a global picture, as you said, Imad, about the situation about documentary heritage in MENA regions, because I have been active from that PAC Center, IFLA PAC Center for years, and now I have another kind of activities still involved in that aspect and the specific focus on trafficking of antiquities. So I will share my screen. I think you see it.
Yes, we can see it, yeah.
Okay, so just few words about the protection. You know, now we go, as Claire has been explaining with an interesting story, that we have to go in much more in a holistic approach. During many years from my experience, almost 40 years of working in preservation in libraries, we see that it's time to go to a more holistic approach, taking in consideration not only like the preservation, restoration, but which I will mention later on. But we have to see that, as I showed you on this graphs on the screen, which shows you that now we really have to consider the economics, the legal aspects. Myself being a lawyer by training, it's one of my point of interest, and that's what I'm focused on trafficking. But the scientific aspect of protection of the heritage and the cultural aspect, social aspect, and communities, and so on. I will not go much more further. I will on this graph, but I will like just to highlight a little bit the situation for the MENA region. So as IFLA, as Claire has been saying, there is for libraries, there is a IFLA PAC Center in the library, but there is also, we have to say as a good point that UNESCO, for example, is more and more active in all the MENA region. And also, as I insist always on that, and Claire did it also, that we should not work too much isolated, like the libraries alone. And it's a global perspective for heritage protection. And in that aspect, we have to work with, for example, UNESCO as a regional center for World Heritage in Bahrain, which is very dynamic. There is a big conference today, by the way. ICROM has an office in Sharjah for Arab countries, the Blue Shield. All these organizations are more active. They may have some office and branches now in the region. And I think we have to highlight that it's very good progress. Also, as you are in Beirut, the reactivity post-disaster is much more efficient than it would have been maybe 20 years ago. We have seen how wonderful and efficient has been the professional reactivity after the blast in the few days and hours in August 2020. So I think that also showed that there is a very much better professional awareness and capacity building than it was maybe when I started to work actually in the MENA regions 30 years ago. Still, we have some point to develop and to progress. Don't forget that MENA region is still a region for conflict and post-conflict. And this needs very specific attention. And when you have conflict, you have, beside of the dramatic situation for people and communities, but for heritage, it's lack of protection, is destruction, it is trafficking, it is a lack of history and cultural memory. So there is a lot to say about that aspect. And just to remember the situation today in Gaza and post-conflict situation in Iraq, but also in Libya, Syria, Sudan, and also because if we have to see that in the very global view, situation is also, we cannot see it just as MENA region, but peripheric regions like Central Asia with Afghanistan, sub-Saharan countries like Mali are also problematic countries. And I will come back to that when I'll speak about trafficking, because trafficking means crossing the borders. And so we cannot stay just to look what's happened in the MENA regions. We need still for the MENA regions, for the protection, that means the legal protection in general, the improvement of heritage laws. Not all the countries has a high enough level of protection for heritage, even less for documentary heritage, which is not always well protected or as well protected as other kind of heritage in the laws. And that's also a big problem. And we need to work on that. Training and capacity building is for sure a big need, even if there is a lot of progress since many years. And I would say the biggest need now is to convince the decision rulers, the lawmakers. I think the professionals, and we can see today with the success of that conference in Beirut, but also the large public, they are completely focused and interested, and they understand the challenges of heritage protection. And still, we have to work and to convince maybe the lawmakers and the decision maker. If I go now to preservation and conservation, which is a side aspect of protection globally, I like to show you this kind of graph to show you, like, again, it's still a very holistic approach, which has impact for the tourist development, for the job creation, poverty reduction, community participations, resilience. All these words now are very well understood by the professionals. And whatever we do in the library or in the museums in respect of protection, preservation, and conservation, we understand, we know that whatever we do is not just to preserve a manuscript, which is important, I agree, but it has a much more global perspective impacting the tourism, the jobs, the poverty, the resilience, the communities' engagement, and the memory in general. So that's also, it's a very important aspect. And if I go to the MENA regions, so as Claire has been mentioning, there is a PAC center in Qatar, but and we have also to say that maybe in the dynamic of that center in the Qatar National Library, we see more and more new conservation labs in the libraries in the region, which is also a good progress, because the duty of the Library of Qatar is not to preserve, to conserve all the documentary heritage of the regions. It's more to give a dynamic, to coordinate. But then it's nice. I mean, I was at the region of the creation of that center with Claire in 2015, and almost 10 years later, it's very interesting to see that now. I think part of the success story of that center is that we can see conservation labs and conservation projects in libraries in most of the MENA countries. Saudi Arabia is very active. There is even a documentary heritage center in Alula and other place. And Iraq is very dynamic. You know, the Mosul project, Baghdad is a national library, and Center for Manuscript is dynamic. Karbala as a conservation place. And we can see also in Maghreb, like better coordination at the state level, and even some tentative to work with the regions, because, you know, in Maghreb, as in actually most of the Islamic countries, most of the heritage, and that's a big specific situation, that most part of the documentary heritage is in the hand of private hand, which could be families, private families, or monasteries, or mosques, or local communities, but it's not like we have in Europe, very centralized state, which seized the documentary heritage at the time of the revolution, for example, like in France. So that's also a very specific situation for the MENA regions and all the Islamic regions, countries where you can see that most part of the documentary heritage is still in private hand, whatever is private families or even NGOs or private religious foundations. Still, again, for preservation conservation, I remember, but I told it already, the problem of the conflict and post-conflict situations. Again, also, if I would say with a little bit of, now if we look at the situation, we did a lot of work for conservation, and I just mentioned all the progress in many of these countries, but I think we have to focus more now on preservation. Still, people in libraries, many librarians, they want to do book conservation, manuscript conservation, and there is still a lack of understanding of the importance of preservations instead of conservation. That may be the next priority for the coming years. Also, a need of newly trained conservators and preservationists. In the region, we have already some very good conservators. We have to train more, maybe more also, as I was saying, in the perspective of preservation, like working on the environmental conditions, in the disasters and the preventions, and all these aspects which are linked with what we call the prevention and not really the active conservation. But also something I would like to say that by my experience, we have to be sure that also that these new conservators coming from Arab countries in the MENA regions are going to stay in the region and not going abroad after their training. That's also a challenge. That means also the decision makers have also to understand that in terms of job, this position in the library should be recognized as it should be, and maybe better paid. Also, that's a global problem, as I mentioned before, if I go back to that chart. Also, a difficulty for all the conservators in the region and the librarians is it's still difficult to buy good products for conservation. We need specific papers, specific glues, specific leathers. Almost nothing is produced in the region, so we have to import everything from France, UK, Western countries. It's extremely expensive, it's complicated, and still I am already a little bit disappointed when I go in some countries in the region, because I'm still traveling a lot in the region and see that conservators with a very good hand skills are obliged to use bad quality paper because for their work, or not good enough quality paper because they have a lack of possibility to buy good products or Japanese paper or such kind of products. Now, I wanted to speak more about the aspect of the trafficking, because as Claire was mentioning, in the Qatar National Library, I developed this big program, Himaya, about trafficking. And so first, I would like to remind you the circuits, because it's important to understand how it works. At the origin, we have the theft of the collection. So people are going to steal manuscripts, but also if we see that more holistic approach, it could be like illegal excavations, looting inside of the archaeological site. And if you look at this picture downstairs left, Apamea, Apame in Syria, if you see picture 2011 and 2012, I mean, this is shocking for archaeologists. In 2011, it was a kind of normal archaeological site. In 2012, 1 year later, you see thousands of small holes. And each one of these holes, imagine, because of the lack of security on this famous archaeological site, looters, illicit traffickers, illegal archaeologists come here and make their own small holes and dig and try to find some items to export. So you see, in 1 year, the archaeological site is fully destroyed, but that means also thousands and hundreds of thousands of items which have been looted and illicitly exported. I have no time to go in details, but we have a big difference here, because the theft of a collection, we are speaking about items which are existing. They could be in a register, they could be in inventory, they were existing. When we speak about looting, like in Apamea, this picture on right side, 2012, this object, we call them orphan because they are not inventoried, because they were under the earth in in the archaeological site, not yet found, and not inventory, not used, I would say, since thousands of years. And they were calmly waiting their turn under earth, and suddenly they are looted without any professional documentations and just to be exported for money. And that is what we call looting, and we are in front of orphan objects, which is a big problem for trafficking. Then we have the export, so you can see that people can go to the airport and they can have a manuscript or a small archaeological object. They can leave sometime. So, and then we have the transportation and the import usually in Europe. The customs is important. Then we have the market. You can see this picture of an auction selling in November 2021, Timurid Quran for a value of $1 million, which was stolen 4 years ago in the Kabul archives. So you can see how much it's linked also with all this problem of these countries with conflict and post-conflict situation, like Afghanistan in that case. And then you have the buyers, and the buyers look how nice this nice interior in Paris is very nice, and you see a table done with the capital of archaeological site. You see an amphore, so it's very chic to have a kind of modern design with a few antiquities. And these are the buyers who are participating also to this process of trafficking. And I don't want to blame only the private collectors. You have seen the case recently in the newspaper when the Getty Museum in Los Angeles lost his appeal against the government of Italy, and they're obliged now to return some sculptures which has been looted and bought without due diligences and serious control of the origin of the item. So you can have here a kind of global view of the problem of trafficking. If I want to show you, for example, what I show to my students in where now we have to it's very important to understand the complexity, because we are in front of a very complex situation. We call that VUCA approach. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity are the keywords making the VUCA approach. And you can see on this graph, but I don't have time to explain you in details, the problem of the market and the circulation, the monitoring, the control of this illicit circulation, and the positive developments, which I would like to highlight, like more and more we see professionals to be careful when they buy something, but still a lot of needs of working, of educations, of people to due diligences and provenance studies. Restitutions are more and more often now after seizure or even post-colonial restitution, which is another topic, but very interesting. So you see here the globality of these questions of this complex case of trafficking. To finish, I would like to make a kind of global view about the situation in the MENA region again. So we have to understand better the legal framework, for sure, because it's complex. We are speaking about various countries. We are speaking about international law. We are speaking about soft law. Just imagine that we have only two, which is already a good progress, but we have only two decisions of the Security Council of United Nations forbidding the circulation of antiquities, including manuscripts in the MENA regions, mostly for Syria and Iraq, but we can extend it to Yemen by the jurisprudence. We need more judicial rapidity, for sure, and we need also more resource for the law enforcement. They have to be, they need more staff, they need more tools, they need the resources, and because it's a global problem, as I was saying. It starts with maybe a tourist exporting something which he bought on a market. Still, it's part of the trafficking. And we can go to the blood antiquities, which is antiquities trafficking, which is financing the terrorism. So you can see the extreme of the situation makes the situation even more complex, as I was saying before. So more cooperation between the professionals and the libraries, more transparency. There is a lack of transparency when professionals are acquiring something and they are not sharing enough information, and there is a need of share open source database to be able to do proper work of provenance studies. And also when we were speaking before about restitution. For the restitution, the best tool is the legal tool from UNIDROIT Convention 1995. And unfortunately, we have very few, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 2 countries from the Arab region having ratified the UNIDROIT Convention. And we hope, if I can advocate today for UNIDROIT, that Lebanon will also join this UNIDROIT Convention, which is the best tool to work on restitution of items after trafficking. So that's also something which is important to highlight. In MENA region, also we have a very surprising situation because it's a source of supply, for sure. We are in the middle of the history of the civilizations from Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, everywhere, Iran. You can imagine how much source of supply we can find, which the buyers worldwide are happy to acquire, as I was showing before. And so we are a region about source of supply, but also end buyers, because some of these countries in these MENA regions, like maybe the Gulf region, are quite rich, and they can afford to buy manuscripts or antiquities for millions of dollars. So it's a very strange region because we are together source of supply and also place of where the end buyers are happy. But in any case, what is surprising that it's never a short circuit acquisitions. It always goes through free port in some countries in the Gulf or in Asia or in Europe. It goes also through the market of Europe, which is the best place to sell for the traffickers to sell their antiquities and manuscripts. So it's, and this also shows that we have to understand better these traffickers and traffic circuits to be able to find them better. Some progress still, for example, the European University of where I'm teaching with the American University of Afghanistan, there is a course on combating illicit trafficking of antiquities and manuscripts. 5 universities of the regions, including in Lebanon and in Qatar, in Iraq, and other countries, and in Palestine, are members of this network. That means that students can attend the course about fighting trafficking and the provenance studies from many ways in the region. It's a new course, but it shows also the new interest of the universities and also of the students to have a kind of basic training on that topic. And we can say, as Claire was showing, that international organizations are more and more active in the regions. I was mentioning, I will not go in details because Claire did the program of Himayah to fight trafficking. And also we can also be happy to see that there is more and more objects seized by the customs, but unfortunately not enough yet seized at the border of the MENA countries, like the border of Lebanon or the border of Iraq, but it's usually more porous borders, and it's arrived to Europe, and hopefully still it's could be seized, even if what is seized, imagine it's maybe just a very small part of what is circulating. When you speak with the World Customs Organization, they can control less than 1 containers for 1,000. So imagine what could be the porosity of the borders and the traffickers. But anyway, still also to finish with that good note, law enforcement officers are much more better trained. There was a lot of training organized in Lebanon, by the way. NATO now is working on that because they are very much afraid by what we say brute antiquities. And as I was mentioning before, as trafficking linked with terrorist funding. So there is a kind of hope for the training of the customs of police in the region. And just to show you, to finish, and to show you how much maybe the public and the creative industry understood the importance of the trafficking, maybe more than the lawmakers sometimes and the decision makers, you can see since few years that at least in the movies, you can see a lot of information about trafficking. Yeah? There is a movie, La Chimera, Kabalyaki in Iran, which is a series about traffickers. There is a series in Netflix about this famous theft in Boston. There is a movie in France, and I just put 2 or 4 to show you that at least if our decision makers and lawmakers don't give the resources necessary for the fighting about trafficking, at least we can see that the public has the ways and understand more this issue, because you can see since 4 years, many movies speaking about this problem. I will finish here. You can contact me here by my personal email or professional emails, and I am at your disposal if you need information.
Thank you, Stefan. As you can see, Stefan is one of the leading experts in this field, and he authored various books and papers on the subject. Actually, I'm planning with him to hold a workshop at the American University in Baghdad about combating manuscript trafficking later in the coming few months. Anyway, before we close the first part of this session, any questions for Claire or Stefan? Please raise your hand and introduce yourself. Yeah, come in. You have the mic, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Imad. I want to ask Stefan, are you using the ID art application created by the Interpol for assigning or discovering the international stolen antiquities? Thank you.
Thank you for your. It's a very good question. Thank you for raising that point. Yes, I do, and it's a very good tool, and I use it with my students. Including some Lebanese students, and we use it in practical sessions every week to try to identify stolen items and to do the provenance studies. Still, I will have a kind of regret that if you check first, in comparison, what I was saying before, in that database, you find only what has been stolen. So we don't find, obviously, the looted items, because they are not, this is looted by night illegally in the archaeological site, is not declared to the police. And in the Interpol database, you find only what has been stolen, declared to a local police, which will be cascaded to the Interpol database. So that is not representing all what has been stolen or looted. And if I have also one regret, if you check, for example, for Arab countries, because my course with my students is focused on MENA region and Central Asia, you have almost, I would not say nothing, you have very, very few items coming, which has been declared as stolen in MENA region. I was checking yesterday because I had a course yesterday with my student for Yemen. For Yemen, you have 2 items. For Afghanistan, you have 1 item. You see, just to give you an example. So for Italian, French art, you have thousands. And that shows that it's a pity because MENA region is the main supply sources, but and that shows values as we can discuss for that for hours. That says also that the professionals, and that's something that we have to speak with Claire, maybe to convince the professionals to go to the police when there is something stolen instead of hidden the information. And we have a working group together with IFLA and the International Council of Archives called EGAT, working on that and trying to, it's very interesting because for the first time, and not for the first time, but for trafficking, it's a joint group, IFLA and ICA, International Council of Archives. And we are just going to produce soon some guidelines for the librarians and the archivists to say, please, when you have something missing, go to the police, because then at the end, these things can arrive on the market, they can be sold, and there is no way to track them. So coming back to your question, the database of Interpol on phone, it's wonderful. I have it on my phone, and everyone should have it and use it every day. Unfortunately, as a supply region, there is very few. But it's a good step, and if together with IFLA, ICR, and the professionals, if we can convince the professionals, as soon as there is something missing, to go to declare it as a safe, then in maybe 10 years, the database of Interpol will become much more efficient. I guess that Claire agrees with me.
Yeah, if I
Thank
could
you.
just, if I could pick up on that just very quickly, we, using object ID, becoming familiar with object ID is one of the aspects of our work in this area, but we're also advocating for more flexibility with object ID because it is based on a museum model, and many libraries' cataloging practices don't align with object ID, but with raising awareness of reporting stolen objects, we're also raising awareness of the importance of photographing. Maybe you can't photograph every page of a book, every page of a manuscript, but especially photographing unique identifiers, ownership markings, things like that. So we are trying to build awareness of creating some more possibilities of interoperability with Object ID.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any more
Thank you.
question? I'll take one more question. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Good morning. This is Arif Shaun from Qatar National Library. Thank you, both Claire and Stefan. Stefan, it's good to see you after a long time. You look more relaxed than you were before when you were at QNL. But this is a question for Claire. So thank you. I think when I say everybody will agree that IFLA has done a commendable job in creating awareness about various aspects related to cultural heritage, documentary heritage, preservation and safeguarding, all of that. The IFLA pack at QNL is an evidence of that. But if I can just move the attention forward a little bit to more into the digital realm, does IFLA think that there is a gap when it comes to digital preservation? And what's IFLA's plan to address that? Will we ever see initiatives like the digital MENA version of the Digital Preservation Coalition or the Digital Curation Network? There are many other sort of initiatives in the West. When will we see some of those in this part of the world? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. I think this is definitely a key discussion topic, especially within our Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee, as I mentioned before. I think IFLA has been working with UNESCO in the PERSIST program for several years, and I think where we are right now with digital preservation, we are creating more questions than we're having answers for. So that was the impetus behind the action of the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee for the next year, the development of this network, this cross-IFLA network on digital preservation, digital cultural heritage. One of the goals of that work is to create a pathway forward for IFLA to more meaningfully interact in this area. And the idea, as I said, it was to bring professionals from different backgrounds, from the preservation side, but also from the tech IT side, together to be having these conversations, but not only looking cross thematically, but also internationally. So the advisory committee coming out of this network, there could very well be advice or opportunities to take it forward at the regional level. And I think our cooperation with our regional division network will help facilitate that. But where we are at the moment is trying to create a timeline, a pathway forward for how IFLA might position itself and create opportunities at the regional or again at the national, international level to more meaningfully involve librarians in this way. So please look out for more information. And I think you're right, having a regional approach is really, really critical. So working, as I said, with the regional divisions will be really important for that. So I hope that gives an idea of where we're going, but your point is very well taken. And we're having those conversations internally as well.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Thank you, Stefan.
If I can just add, I was checking during the speech of Claire, I was checking, and there is in the database of Interpol, there is 36 items and 0 manuscripts and 0 books. So you see, and there is probably thousands of items stolen in Lebanon or looted since years. And we have today in the database only 30 items. So that shows a problem.
Stefan, we have to switch to Arabic. We're going to the next part of the session. Thank you. It was good to have you with us. Thank you so much. See you on another occasion. Thank you. Thank you so much. طيب يعطيكم العافية. هلا حننقل للعربي. عندنا بعد مشاركة واحدة بس من زميلتنا فاطمة، مش موجودة. ها منا اونلاين فاطمة. طيب لازم يلا. سلامات مرة تانية. المفروض نحن معنا مشاركة ثالثة من زميلتنا فاطمة البزال. ما قدرت تكون ببيروت ولا قدرت تطلع اونلاين، فأنا حأعمل البرزنتيشن عنها. أنا مشارك فيها البرزنتيشن، بس هي المين اوثر لإلها، باعتباري مشرف على المشروع اللي عم تشتغل عليه. الحقيقة المشروع اللي عم نحكي عنه يقع في إطار التعاون بين مؤسسات بحثية معنية بالتراث الثقافي وباحثين في جامعات معروفة. يعني إذا بتشوفوا الصورة الأولى، سوري، في صورة ومن تحت عميد المعهد العالي للدكتوراه بالجامعة اللبنانية دكتور محمد محسن، وفيرينا كليم كمان بروفيسور بدراسة المخطوطات والكالتشرال هيريتيج بلايبزيج يونيفرسيتي، وأنا صار في اتفاق معهم. أنا عندي فاطمة طالبة عم تشتغل على دراسة المخطوطات بجبل عامل في لبنان، دراسة ما هو مفقود وما هو خفي. حاول تعمل إعادة تقييم بطريقة ما. عرفوا بهذا المعهد عن المشروع وطلبوا أنه يتعاونوا معنا بهذا البحث، فلذلك هلأ في تعاون وفاطمة عم تشتغل معهم بهذا الموضوع. ححاول أعرض لكم شوي عن المشروع اللي عم يشتغلوا عليه اللي اسمه بيبليوتيكا أرابيكا. أوكي، ما بعرف، في كتار منكم ممكن ما يكونوا بيعرفوا شيء عن الموضوع. هو له من 2018، بس عنده موقع على انترنت وفي سيرش انجن، في عنده داتا بيز كمان على انترنت، فيكم تفوتوا عليه وتاخذوا معلومات اكثر. باختصار، مشروع البيبليوتيكا أرابيكا هو إعادة دراسة للمخطوط العربي أو الإسلامي وتقديمه من جديد، سواء دراسة ما هو مفقود أو إعادة دراسة ما درس سابقا، بناء على تقنيات جديدة ومعالجة مختلفة تعتمد على ما هو خارج نص الوثيقة أيضا وليس في نص الوثيقة. بتعرفوا نحن بالمكتبات وبعالم المكتبات باللايبرري سيستم بنهتم بالمحتوى. اوكي، بنعمل فهرسة بالمحتوى، اذا في كومنتس، في انوتيشنز، في ريفيوز، يمكن ما بنهتم فيه كتير. بالمخطوطات عم بيقولوا في كتير كومنتس كانت تنعمل من اللي بيعمل نسخ للمخطوطة، من اللي بيشتريها أوقات، من اللي بيطلع عليها. فهي كله هذا يعتبر جزء لا يتجزأ من المخطوطة. عم بيحاولوا يدرسوا ويحاولوا يدرسوا البيئة اللي عاشت فيها المخطوطة أيضا، وين راحت، وين انتقلت، مين اشتراها، كل هالتفاصيل، ويعملوا ربط بين كل عناصر المخطوط هيدا والعناصر اللي تفاعلت معه. هلا في أكثر من سكيل للدراسة. في شيء بيسموه هن الماكرو، وفي شيء اللي هو المايكرو. الحقيقة الموضوع منه معقد كتير، معقد من ناحية علمية وأكاديمية، ولكنه دعوة جديدة، وأنا هيدا اللي لفتني بالموضوع واللي شد انتباهي، وكنت حريص أنه التعاون يتم. نحن بحاجة لإعادة قراءة لقضايا كثيرة. يعني ما نعتقد أنه ما نقرأه اليوم، سواء أنتج من خلال مخطوط أو من خلال أبحاث، أنه هو قائم ونهائي. يمكن إعادة قراءة لهذا المخطوط في زمن ما وبطريقة ما ومن شخص ما آخر تقدم تحليل آخر واستنتاج آخر. العالم اليوم يتجه إلى تغييرات كثيرة وكبيرة يعني، ولذلك إعادة قراءة تاريخ منطقتنا، المنطقة العربية، المنطقة الإسلامية، جدير بالاهتمام. لأنه اللي بيشوف اللي نحن فيه والأوضاع اللي نحن فيها على المستوى الثقافي، على المستوى السياسي، على المستوى الاجتماعي، على المستوى الديني، على المستوى التاريخي، على المستوى الفكري، عم نحكي مش بس المستوى الأدبي، يعني بيقول في شيء غلط، في شيء غلط بهالقراءات وبهالاستنتاجات وبتقديم تاريخ المنطقة للآخرين، أو إشبعنا هالتاريخ بطريقة مختلفة ربما ما كانت موجودة سابقا. فلذلك المشروع لفت نظري. وأنا أضيف أيضا يعني أنا حضرت، ما كنت بلبنان، جيت أمس، بس شفت سيشن إلى علاقة بالارتفيشال انتليجنس ومعالجة المخطوطات بالأمس. الحقيقة الارتفيشال انتليجنس أنا بفترض ماني خبير مخطوطات على فكرة، أنا بتعلم منها لفاطمة بهالموضوع كمشرف يعني، أوكي؟ بس بعتقد الارتفيشال انتليجنس إذا دخل إلى محتوى النصوص ومحتوى التفاعلات والكومنتس وكل ما رافق المخطوطات سيقدم تحليلات مختلفة، وسيقدم رؤية مختلفة، وسيقدم نتائج مختلفة. ليه؟ لأنه ال AI أشطر بالربط بين المفاهيم، وأشطر بالربط بمعرفة الأشخاص، خصوصا مع تغير الأسماء، هل هم ذاتهم الأشخاص ولا لا، ومتى ذكرت أسماؤهم، وأين وكيف وكم مرة. بعتقد الاي اي بس يدخل على النصوص حيغير شغلات كتير في اعادة تقديمها من جديد، لانه في عناصر قد يفقدها الانسان، ما يشوفها، او شافها مثل ما هو بده، ما شافها بناء على حقائق، بعيدا عن ترسبات لديه ربما، او فهم سابق لديه حول موضوع معين، او بريجوديس عنده اياه ما حدا بيعرف. لذلك البيبليوتيكا أرابيكا مشروعها اللي بلش 2018 بينتهي بالعام 2035 هو منفتح على كل مشاريع بحثية مرتبطة بتقديم، يعني بإعادة تقديم هذه المخطوطات، سواء كانت مفقودة ووجدناها في البيوت والدساكر وفي أماكن معينة، أو في مكتبات ولكن غير محققة بعد وغير معروفة، أو إعادة دراسة مخطوطات قدمت من سابقا والاطلاع عليها من جديد. لذلك المشروع يهدف إلى إعادة قراءة الأدب العربي بمعناه الواسع، مش يعني أدب، مش الأدب يعني الليتريتشر، الأدب الفكر، إذا بدنا فينا نقول الفكر العربي، الفكر الإسلامي، خصوصا بعد ما في، نحن تعرفوا بتاريخنا في عصر نهضة وفي عصر انحطاط. بيقولوا بعد العباسيين صار في انحطاط، في ناس ما بيوافقوا على الموضوع، بيقولوا في كتير شغلات كتبت وموجودة بمخطوطات وأنا قرأت أكثر من مكان في اختلافات بهالمجال. ولكن هلا سواء كان عصور انحطاط أو عصور ما بعد النهضة، لقت إنتاج فكري أو لم تجد إنتاج فكري، ما هو موجود يوحي بشيء، وحتى ما وجد سابقا يوحي بشيء. الهدف المشروع مهم وله تمويل من الدولة الألمانية بعتقد، ونحن كجامعة لبنانية على مستوى الإيكول دكتورال لقينا أن التعاون قد يكون مفيد، خصوصا لما المؤسسات البحثية والجامعية تصبح ناشرة. يعني هي تنشر مش بس بحث علمي، ربما تنشر كتاب عن الموضوع وتنشر دكتوراه من أول وجديد بهالمجال. فهذا باختصار المشروع. طبعا في له جوانب كتير معنية. إذا بتفوتوا على الداتابيز اللي هو تحت اسم خزانة، إذا بتحطوا خزانة بالإنجليش بتلاقوه، يعني معروف، أو بيبليوتيكا أرابيكا، بتلاقوا إنه في كتير تفاصيل بيحكوا عنها وزايدينها وحقول إلى علاقة بالكومنتس وإلى علاقة بالأمكنة اللي انباعت فيها المخطوطة أو اللي وجدت فيها أو اللي راحت عليها. الحقيقة مشروع كبير، وعم يحاولوا يجمعوا مخطوطات ويشوفوا المكتبات اللي كانت فاعلة بذلك الزمن شو كانت يعني أهدافها وشو اشتغلت وشو عملت وشو قدمت، حتى بيحاولوا يجمعوا مجموعات معينة تابعة لبعض الأشخاص اللي تبعثرت وتشتتت، سواء كان هربت أو بيعت أو اشتراها حدا أو راحت على أمكنة تانية، يحاولوا يجمعوها كلها ويعاد النظر إلى كمجموعات متكاملة، لأنه لما ننظر لأمور كمجموعات متكاملة غير لما بناخد الشغلات بشكل فرادي. طبعا أنا بعتقد الاي اي اللي هني بعد ما شايرين له، بس أنا بعتقد الاي اي وإدخاله في هالمجال سيقدم الكثير وسيغير بالكثير من التفاصيل. نحن بنعرف بالاندكسينج انه بتعطيه تكست للسيستم، بيروح بيجمع، بياخد كلمات دالة وكلمات ستوب ووردز بيشيلهم على جنب، وهول بيرتبهم وبيعدل لك نمبر اوف occurrences. بس الريليشنال والعلاقات وبين الأسماء وبمجموعة هائلة من النصوص بعتقد الاي اي حيقدم فهم مختلف مبني على حقائق بعيدة عن رواسب الإنسان الفكرية والسابقة واللي ممكن يبني عليها أو يتأثر فيها. أنا هذا المشروع أتمنى له التوفيق، وبعتقد فاطمة هي بتحكي عن الموضوع أحسن مني أكيد، بتمنى لها التوفيق فيه. هي بالبدايات هلأ، بس مشروع مهم وهي عم تشتغل معهم هلأ، وحبيت ضوي على هالاتفاق اللي صار بين بيبليوتيكا أرابيكا مع الجامعة اللبنانية الإيكول دكتورال. ما فيني أقول أكثر من هيك أنا هلأ، وفيكم تدخلوا على الموقع وبتقروا عنا بتقروا عن المشروع، يعني ما بدي أنا أحكي لكم إياهم. وإذا في شيء أسئلة استضاحية تفضلوا، أهلا وسهلا. في أسئلة خلاص؟ طيب أنا بشكركم كثير وتعبناكم معنا اليوم. Thank you so much. تفضلي.
صباح الخير مجددا.
أهلا، صباح النور.
جميلة جابر، الجامعة الإسلامية. ذكرت أول شيء حضرتك دكتور عماد مخطوطات جبل عامل، كأني أنا هيك سمعت أو بس خلال الحديث رجعت حكينا مخطوطات بشكل عام.
لا هي عم تشتغل على مجموعة معينة، بديش أحكي عنها، مجموعة معينة من المخطوطات لابن خاتون، لواحد محدد يعني.
بجبل عامل؟
إيه هو إيه.
بجبل عامل، لكن المشروع هو أوسع
إيه بس
بكثير.
المخطوطات مش موجودين، هم موجودين خارج لبنان.
نعم. شكرا بس.
أوكي، ويلكم. في أسئلة تانية؟ طيب يلا، عذبناكم معنا اليوم، تفضلوا خذوا بريك خلص. والله في سيشن تاني بلا بريك؟ معقول؟ لا ظلمناكم هيك، لكن احنا ما تواخذونا، طولنا عليكم اليوم. يلا.